Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. I am so thrilled to be your guide today as we explore what I like to call the Earth's massive dynamic sculpting studio. You know, the ground beneath our feet feels incredibly permanent and still, right? But on a geological timescale, our planet is actually a restless artist. It is constantly pushing, pulling, building, and carving the spectacular landscapes we see around us. So today, we're going to look really closely at exactly how this grand studio operates. Here is our quick itinerary for today's geological field trip. We'll start with Earth's master sculpting forces, then look at mountains that are pushed and folded, followed by mountains built and carved. After that, we'll cover plateaus, learn how to spot these landforms out in nature, and finally wrap up with a handy geography glossary. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1. Earth's master sculpting forces, the opposing sculptors shaping our world. To really understand how our planet gets shaped, we have to look at our two master sculptors. It is beautifully divided into two main categories. We have endogenic, or endogenous movements, coming from the inside of the Earth, and exogenic, or exogenic forces acting from the outside. These geomorphic processes literally dictate every single hill, valley, and peak on the entire globe. Let's break that down, because it's actually pretty simple. Endogenous forces, there are builders. Driven by the intense, crazy heat deep inside the Earth's mantle, these internal forces push up the crust through folding, faulting, and volcanic activity. They construct things. On the flip side, exogenous forces are the external sculptors. Powered by the sun and gravity, agents like wind, rain, and ice act as destructive or denuditational forces. Just imagine a human sculptor chipping away at a block of marble. That's exactly what these forces do. They weather and erode the land masses that the endogenous forces just built up. Moving right along to Section 2, mountains, pushed and folded, where we'll look at the architecture of compression and tension. First up, let's talk about fold mountains. These are formed by endogenous methods, specifically intense horizontal compression when two tectonic plates literally crash into each other. Think of it like this. If you place your hands on the opposite ends of a tablecloth or a rug on your floor and just push them together, what happens? The middle of the fabric crumples, right? It wrinkles and rises up. This is exactly what happens to the Earth's solid crust over millions of years. The rock layers buckle into upward folds called anticlines and downward folds called synclines, uplifting the crust into towering, majestic peaks. Now here's a really crucial point. Not all fold mountains look the same. It completely depends on their age. Young fold mountains, like the massive Himalayas in Asia or the Rockies in North America, formed relatively recently in the Cenozoic era. They are sharp, rugged, and towering simply because the exogenous forces just haven't had enough time to erode them yet. In contrast, old fold mountains, like the Appalachians in the USA and the Urals in Russia, formed hundreds of millions of years ago in the Paleozoic era. Exogenous weathering has basically worn them down over deep time, giving them a much lower elevation and gentle, rounded profiles. But what if the Earth's crust is being pulled apart instead of pushed together? Well, this endogenous tension leads to block mountains. Imagine you have a cracked graham cracker. If you pull it apart slightly, that middle piece might slip down while the pieces on the side stay elevated. In geology, the block that slips down is called a graben, and the steep, elevated blocks remaining on either side are called horsts. This faulting process creates incredibly steep block mountains, such as the Vosges in France or the Black Forest in Germany. Okay, on to Section 3, mountains, built and carved. Let's look at volcanoes and residual peaks. Next up on our field trip, volcanic mountains, which are also known as mountains of accumulation. These are formed by endogenous volcanism. Imagine taking a tube of toothpaste and pointing it straight up. You squeeze it, a layer of paste squirts out and dries. Squeeze it again, another layer dries right on top. Over time, magma ejects from a fissure in the earth, becoming lava on the surface. Successive layers of this molten lava, along with ash and cinders, just pile up around the vent, eventually building that massive, characteristic cone shape we all recognize. On the totally flip side of that are circumerosional or residual mountains. These are formed entirely by exogenous denudation. Okay, picture a beautifully layered cake left outside in a really heavy rainstorm. It's sad, I know. But the soft icing is going to wash away super quickly, leaving only the dense, hard cake layers standing behind. That's exactly what happens over millions of years. Agents like wind, rain, and glaciers erode the softer rock of ancient highlands. The hard, highly resistant rock masses that actually survive this relentless carving are left standing as isolated residual mountains. Let's ground this with some real-world examples. Majestic Mount Fuji in Japan and Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania are your classic volcanic mountains.
For residual mountains, we have the incredibly scenic Scottish Highlands in the UK and the Aravalli Range in India. And it's super fascinating to note that the Aravallis were actually once the oldest fold mountain system in India, but millions of years of those exogenous forces have worn them down so completely that they are now classified as relict or residual mountains.
Section 4. We are shifting gears to plateaus, the elevated tablelands. So how do you get a massive flat piece of land thousands of feet in the air? Well, the first way plateaus form is through endogenous tectonic uplift, specifically a process called crustal shortening. When massive tectonic plates collide, the incredible pressure doesn't just fold the edges into mountains, it can actually thicken the continental crust way behind those mountains, thrusting entire vast flat regions straight up into the sky. Now, another totally different endogenous method gives us volcanic plateaus. But unlike the violent, explosive eruptions that build cone-shaped mountains, this process is much, much quieter. Highly fluid, low-viscosity basaltic lava extrudes really smoothly from long cracks or fissures in the crust. Because it's so runny, it spreads outward over massive areas before it solidifies. Over numerous quiet eruptions, these horizontal sheets of rock build up to form thick, elevated tablelands. Finally, we have plateaus that have been heavily modified by our outside sculptors. Enter the dissected plateau. Here, an already elevated flat plateau sits completely exposed to the elements. Exogenous erosional processes totally take over. Rivers, streams, and glaciers continuously flow across the surface, carving out deep, narrow valleys and canyons into the rock. Eventually, they dissect the once flat landform into a complex, rugged network of hills and gorges. And this brilliantly illustrates how different processes yield completely unique tablelands. We have intermontane plateaus, which are those tectonic uplifts sandwiched right between mountains, like the massive Tibetan Plateau in Asia, famously known as the roof of the world. Then we have volcanic plateaus, formed by lava extrusion, like India's Deccan Plateau and the Columbia Plateau in the USA. And finally, dissected plateaus, shaped over time by erosional denudation, like the beautifully rugged Scottish Highlands. Moving into Section 5, Spotting Landforms in Nature. This is your geologist's field guide. Consider this your personal cheat sheet for your next hike. Look for these visual clues out in nature. If you see sharp, jagged, towering peaks touching the clouds, you're looking at young fold mountains. If the hills are gentle, rolling, and rounded, those are old fold mountains that have been weathered down. See a massive flat top that suddenly drops off in a steep cliff or escarpment? You've found a plateau. Isolated hills of hard rock standing all alone on a flatter plain are your residual mountains. And if you spot a distinct, towering cone shape, for sure you are looking at a volcanic mountain. And finally, Section 6, our Grade 6 Geography Glossary. Time to decode the jargon. Let's decode some of this technical jargon together, all right? Diastrophism. It sounds complicated, but it's really just a fancy word for large-scale deformation of the crust, like folding and faulting. Endogenous means those internal, constructive forces originating from deep inside the earth. When rocks fold, a syncline is the downward trough-like fold, and an anticline is the upward arch-like fold. And denudation is simply the exogenous wearing away of the land by weather and erosion. Always remember, these big scientific words are just specific names for the pushing, pulling, and carving we've been talking about this whole time. Before we wrap up, I want to give you all a quick, friendly reminder. To really cement what we've learned today, make sure to grab your copy of the Cambridge Connection Geography 4th edition by Sangeeta Sharda for Grade 6, and specifically, open up the map practice booklet inside. Seriously, use that booklet to track down all the amazing global locations we discussed today, from the Himalayas to the Appalachians to the Deccan Plateau. Seeing where they actually sit on the map really brings the science to life. I want to conclude our explainer today with a little thought experiment. If the Earth's sculpting studio is always open, if those endogenous and exogenous forces literally never take a day off, what do you think your hometown is going to look like a million years from now? Will it be a towering fold mountain, a flat plateau, or maybe completely washed away into a valley? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me on this geological field trip today. Keep your eyes open, keep asking questions, and never stop observing the incredible world around you. See you next time.